11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I have a joke for you.
Okay.
The government in this town is excellent and uses your tax dollars efficiently.
I didn't see it coming. The moment the economies will go forward.
Bitcoin is immune from attack almost completely. But Bitcoin, you will actually gain far more from using that computing power to generate Bitcoins.
There's a system approaching perfection. Just in time for our disappearance. There's a system approaching perfection. Just in time for our disappearance.
We'll walk deeper into the belly of the beast if it means I'm able to further limit reckless government spending. I mean, I have so many ideas. Some are simple, like take down traffic lights and eliminate the post office. The bigger ones will be tougher, like bring all of this crumbling to the ground.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is The Crypto Show, a show dedicated to understanding the promise of currency, technology, and anarchy, and the pursuit of a free society. And if you believe, like we do, that such a society can exist, then join us as we parade through a world unbound by convention, a world sketched by the beauty of the human artist, because each and every one of you listening right now is that artist. So for the next 2 hours, do me a favor, let go of your most sacred systems of thought and entertain the possibility that maybe, just maybe, everything we've been told about currency, technology, and even that word anarchy is only one part of an ever-expanding, ever-possible, complex universe of ideas that we simply refuse to explore. So what do you say, listeners? Let's do some universe exploring and have some fun while we do it. To my right, Ryan Dixon. I am Harlan Dietrich, and we are the humble hosts of your crypto show with our guests in studio, not guests, our co-hosts in studio.
These are the men behind the scenes.
The men behind the scenes. The team that makes it all run so smoothly. Danny Sessoms and Jonathan Rumian. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Yeah, fair to middly.
Fair to middly?
Yeah. It's kind of a weather joke.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, what is it today? It is Wednesday, November 5th. We are live.
Remember, the 5th of November.
Yeah, something happened on that day, right?
Yeah, something.
I can't quite remember, but something happened.
Matthew McConaughey's birthday or something.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Right. Yesterday.
Oh, that's yesterday.
Of course, you can always check us out, thecryptoshow.com. We're also over on logosradionetwork.com, txlr.net, and in the Austin area, 90.1 FM. And, of course, this evening, joining us for the syndication debut, going out to our friends over at Liberty Movement Radio. That's libertymovementradio.com. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/The Crypto Show, and Twitter at The Crypto Show. I think we're still working on the Instagram thing, so you can always poke around and maybe find us over there. I'm not sure what the status on that is.
We're everywhere. We're worldwide.
Worldwide.
On the World Wide Web.
So, got a fantastic show lined up for you guys tonight, of course.
Speaking of the World Wide Web,
yeah,
sort of I don't know, what would you say, the one of the historians, there you go. I don't know, the demographers of
something
of the internet,
that nature. Because he's done some documentary work, of course, on the Napster revolution, a fantastic film called Downloaded, and then is currently working on another one that explores the deep web, getting into Silk Road and Bitcoin and its role in that. And we'll have him on in the next segment. Of course, speaking of Alex Winter, perhaps most notably known for his role in Bill and Ted's. And then
you should say about getting him to look into the smoke signal revolution.
It's making a comeback.
The smoke signals and the pigeon carrier syndication. these kinds of things. But yeah, so it should be a good show tonight. Got lots of questions we want to kind of get into with them, and we'll do that on the other side. But how are you guys feeling? It's post-election. Everybody's done with the go out and vote and do the things and all this stuff. What's everybody's post-election take?
Write-ins are surprisingly easy.
I saw what you did.
That's always good. That's always fun.
Yes, my pick for governor was some random jerk.
I saw that. Some random jerk. You also, who was it for? Was it
what
county
was the last
commissioner?
name?
Was
Just
it
jerk?
SpongeBob?
Yeah, I voted for SpongeBob, some random jerk, and Nacho Mama.
I voted for Neil Patrick Harris once for president.
Did you really?
Yeah, he'd make a great president.
I could see that.
At least when he lied to you, it'd be entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Song and dance. There'd
Little
actually be a song
cartwheel
and
or
dance with
something.
it. Instead of just doing a song and dance and lying to us, there'd actually be a song and dance. That wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to lie to me, at least, like, make me kind of giggle about it, why not?
Yeah.
But,
you know what? It's kind of watching the election coverage, the post-election coverage. It's kind of like what I imagine like it was in the 19th century when they would have to like be above like the post-mortem like surgery or the cutting of a body, and everyone's looking down at it. That's sort of what it feels like to watch the post-election coverage. It's like, oh, we're just going to show you how to dissect this and pull out the heart here.
yeah. I noticed
The embalming fluid just sort of waves over you.
there was a lot of people that were really upset with the whole like turnout of the outcome of the election. And to quote a friend of mine on Facebook, I'm not really sure why, because there's no surprise when the election happens as to who wins, because it's government every time.
Yeah,
government always wins.
They always win.
Every election, government's the winner.
They did have a really good outcome.
So-
I noticed that they've cured Ebola, because I haven't heard about it since.
Oh,
Yeah, we were talking about this a couple of shows ago, weren't we?
Didn't I
It was
tell
like
you?
they're going to just ramp it up and go crazy with it, and Ebola, and now go vote. And I'm sorry,
I labeled it the midterm distraction.
The
Ebola.
Wait, they're going to come out, someone got Ebola while voting.
Oh, yeah, that would be good. Did you go and vote? You might have the Ebola.
we have to close the polls.
Cheerios.
We have to close the polls.
Did
No
you
more
see
voting.
did you see the thing about Abbott though? What he's apparently like the first thing he's looking to do is pass like an open carry.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm just kind of, I'm looking at it kind of going, all right.
Not to
He knows the way of my heart.
not to blow our own horn, but we actually used to have somebody that worked in his office feeding him articles and videos.
That a fact.
Just saying.
I did not know this.
Also,
Good-
Bitcoin supporter.
Could be the
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Abbott was one of the first, the only governor, I think, running that
Well, if he legalizes
accepted.
open carry of guns,
Bitcoin.
they should make open carry of jam boxes illegal. Those things look silly.
When was the last time you saw somebody going around with a jam box? I would be delighted on par with that of payphones. Of course, as you know about
I
me,
seen a guy the other day. He was in a payphone booth with his jam box. So.
it was playing somebody a song. That was originally at the advent of the telephone. That was one of the things that they thought it would be used for. They called it the pleasure phone. And you could pick it up at a certain hour and listen to the Opry, and then of course put it back on the receiver. But
It's totally different meaning these days.
yeah, yes it is. Yes it is. And you only see the ads for it very late at night, and typically only on like TBS and TNT, right?
Channel 3.
Something like that.
Does it
Yeah,
have a per minute price on there?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. That's the
I know
one.
the ones you're talking about.
Yep. But I don't know. It's I'm kind of the other thing too that I was going to mention is that there's all this to do also about there's a lot of yeehaw and yabba dabba do about Alaska and Oregon. They got in and I guess legalized the whole marijuana thing. I hate being the jerk at the party. I really, it's not that I enjoy doing it, but, so now I just have to, I said, I was just like, oh, good. Now I'll just have to adjust my figures. So now, through the political processes, it's only taken you 70 years to legalize 1% of the drugs in 8% of the places. in the U.S.
Washington, D.C., too.
You know?
That would
so
be...
maybe 8.1, 8.01.
I think that truly would be a buzzkill. Get your being at the party.
I'm sure it would, and this is why I don't get invited to parties very often. You noticed I went and I crashed that Halloween house party the other day, and I came back very quickly
for stealing all the alcohol from the parties and taking it to another house.
Also, yes, did I tell you about that? I did some house sitting for somebody recently, actually for some family. And typically they will, they'll compensate me for the time, doing that, and I don't mind either way. But I accidentally drank all the scotch. And
how do you accidentally drink the scotch?
I think it's the answer resides somewhere in the nomenclature of one thing leads to another.
Was there tripping and falling involved?
I tripped and fell right on the bottle.
Must have been good scotch.
Yeah, it was some great scotch. Yeah, no, some of my family has some excellent taste in scotch, and it's...
Remind me to never let you house sit.
Unless you need your bar cleaned out, then, I'll be happy to help with that.
Well, in a way, and I'm surprised Danny's not jumping in on this, is that you were paid in an alternative form of currency that's intoxicating. I don't know what else you could be paid in, but Danny might have it.
Yeah,
hash coins?
There it is. There's our hash coin reference every week. It's like, you know what this is, what hash coin has become on this show? It's like Gold Bug. You remember the little thing, like the old Richard Scarry books, and you'd flip through, and there's a little bug fella, and it was almost like the original Where's Waldo. But hash coin has become like that on this show.
Apparently there is a new crypto that is called hash coin.
Really?
Yeah, hash coin,
of course.
Hashnet,
Of course.
Well, it
only took so long.
There was Potcoin.
So I posted pictures of the little hash coins on there, and like, wait a minute, you guys are...
These don't look anything like the hash coins that I had when I was a boy.
What a jip.
Yeah.
What a total jip.
But, so it's... I don't know
how the mining process works.
That's pretty. I think you just get these balls of hash and you roll them out and you stamp a little pot leaf on them. And
that's the mining process.
Yeah, apparently, according to...
I thought it'd be a little more technical.
And for anybody that doesn't know, this is, of course, reference to the cinematic masterpiece, yes, Trailer Park Boys, which it really is. I love Bubbles. He's a great character. There's a Sam Squanch, I can't do it nearly as good, but no, you
really can't.
I'm excited to kind of, to talk to Alex about this stuff tonight because the drug war is kind of a big one, and with the kind of up and coming and unveiling of these technologies today, it is a huge game changer. And there is this question of, do we go the political processes route and, kind of it takes 70 years almost to legalize now, 1% of the drugs in 8% of the places? Or is it maybe perhaps better to examine some of these alternatives where, we effectively make it legal, or in the sense that you can do these things without fear of government reprisal? And so for all intents and purposes, it kind of is.
Well, it can make government law obsolete, and
exactly,
sort of impossible to really enforce, and therefore it's a complete waste of time and resources. So,
not that I want any now, but if they do legalize it here, I won't want it anymore.
No, that's the other thing. Well, there is always that reduction of drug use every time the drugs go, legal. Anyway, we got Alex Winter coming up on the other side, folks. So stay tuned. And welcome back, boys and girls. It is The Crypto Show. It's thecryptoshow.com here on Logos Radio Network. Also, syndicating debut out on libertymovementradio.com. Our guest this evening is perhaps best known for his starring role in the popular Bill and Ted's films, as well as his role as Marco in The Lost Boys. He's written, directed, and starred in the award-winning 1993 cinematic masterpiece Freaked, which was dubbed by the New York Times as one of the top comedies of the 90s.
I loved it.
It was hilarious. Joining us this evening to talk about his recent documentary entitled Downloaded, which premiered at the South by Southwest Film Fest in 2013 and delves into the Napster revolution, as well as his upcoming film Deep Web, currently under production, Alex Winter. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, you guys. It's great to be joining you.
Well, yeah,
it's our honor.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to have you on, man. So let's kind of start out. We'll get this out of the way, and first things first, I guess, because if I don't put this in, we're going to catch flack from some of our audience, that kind of thing. I did have a question for you though about the kind of the Bill and Ted series, this thing. What was it like? And I only ask because I have such a great respect for the guy. But what was it like working with Carlin?
It was pretty great. It was a hard part to cast, and a lot of names had gotten bandied about, and we were pretty far into shooting when he got cast. So it was one of those things when you're making a movie. That was an independent movie. It was a very small independent movie. So when you're making independent movie, well, you're making any kind of movie, it's always kind of catch as catch can, and it can go south at any point. And we were always worried that if they showed up one day with a really crummy Rufus, then the movie really would have been bad. And so we were greatly relieved and surprised, frankly, because Carlin wasn't known for being in movies. We were both relieved and surprised and honored to have him play that part. And I think selfishly we also knew we might have something good on our hands. If it wasn't just resting on our idiotic, small idiotic shoulders. Yeah.
So there was no tall, tall black blonde chick?
Yeah. That's
was, yeah.
Star power.
Yeah. And just the right kind of, really just a very idiosyncratic, interesting character that sort of spoke to what we thought was interesting about the movie, so.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, like I said, I had to get that out of the way and ask because he was always kind of one of the guys I
and looked is it true that his daughter was in the movie? Is that?
I know Kelly. I don't know. Is Kelly in the movie?
What?
I have to ask her. She's on Twitter. We can just ask her. So.
Look at that. Yeah, in real time.
Kelly,
I thought I read that Carlin's.
Yeah, no, she was. She was in that. It was one of his daughters. She's also got a show. I think over on Sirius. I want to say.
Yeah. She's great. Kelly's great, and she's really cool. So we've been talking to her about all the stuff we've been tinkering with the possibility of a third one. And she was one of the first people we went to out of respect for that character and for her dad. So.
Yeah. Well, and I want to ask you about that because
a third one, is that an exclusive that we're breaking?
Unfortunately, it's been slathered around the media for like 4 years, but it's not even a reality yet. It's still been all over the place, but we're working on it.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I always loved those the series as a kid, and so kind of this prospect of having a third one very exciting for me. But
well, yeah, I've always been interested in how sort of nostalgia works, and we see nowadays like sort of things from our childhood and around in the 80s and 90s is sort of being repackaged and sold back and remakes upon remakes, and then it's interesting to see some of your work with what you did with Downloaded as a sort of retrospective, looking back at this sort of period of time that we didn't really appreciate maybe when it was going on, but we now seem to see it as this sort of pivotal moment in technology's history. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what sort of, why you were drawn to that story and maybe explain for the listeners what it was about.
Sure. Well, I mean, Downloaded is a documentary that I directed that just came out last year. It premiered on VH1 a couple days ago, actually, but it came out on the movie theaters and on Netflix, and it premiered at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin in 2013.
We know where that is.
2013.
Yeah, 2013. Thank you. I'm terrible at dates, but it's about the rise and fall of Napster, and really gets into the minutia of kind of the vision that Sean Fanning and Sean Parker had, the development of the technology, the legal skirmish and its demise, and then kind of the rise of iTunes and the sort of, establishment's adoption of this sort of, quote, rogue technology, and turning it into something that was humongously commercial and lucrative for Apple. Mm-hmm. That's really what it was about. My interest in it really has a lot of its roots in what you guys talk about a lot, which is that I got in, online or very early on in the 80s, and was very interested in the BBS and news group community, and the the various alt news groups communities of that era. Late 80s, early 90s, which were, there was no social media, there was no social networks, there was no downloading. People were moving files around who knew what they were doing online, and it was kind of the birth of cryptography as it would impact everybody else. You had the kind of cypherpunks, and you had, you had Tim May's, the cyber anarchist manifesto. That was 1988. You had David Chaum. You had all this stuff going on that was sort of smaller and more rarefied. And I was not in that circle. I was sort of in the world of the kind of the tech savvy layman who was very very intrigued by social communities online and their potential. And so by the time Napster showed up in 1998, 99, it really blew my mind because it took what was this very rarefied small community, and it expanded that community to the entire world. And suddenly you didn't need to know how to move around on the BBS. You didn't need to kind of traverse this very sort of subset area of the internet. It was just anybody, and
because nothing like that existed.
I mean, nothing. It's really hard to describe, and I really go into it in the movie. I really try to convey this in the movie. It's very, very hard to describe what. I mean, people use the word disruptive in very loose, now meaningless terms in this day and age. But Napster was a massive disruption of global culture, and I'm not talking about the music component at all. I'm not talking about downloading Madonna tracks for free. I'm talking about that literally from, a Monday before it existed to the Tuesday when it existed was the difference between, 100 million people in one, real-time global online community and nothing. It was like a big bang. And it totally blew my mind for that reason. Suddenly I went from tinkering around with people in newsgroup communities by the hundreds at the most to, being in communities with like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20 million people worldwide. Well, and that's what the movie is really about is that significance, and the kid from nowhere who thought it up and made it work and what happened to them.
Well, and so let's talk about that because I mean, I do remember it as a kid when I came across that. I was looking at the internet and kind of seeing what was going on. But I want to talk maybe about those kids, as you were saying, the fan, Sean's, I guess we'll say, on the other side. Stay tuned. And welcome back, boys and girls, to the other side of the break here on the Crypto Show. The sweet, sweet sounds of technology, anarchy, and currency.
Sweet sound.
I don't know. I have no idea. Our guest this evening, of course, Alex Winter. We were talking before we went to the break, and then about the downloaded the documentary that you did, which and I told you off air, but I want to say it on air because that was a really amazing piece that you put together there. And I don't say that lightly because I've done, I've put together websites that had, scores of documentaries on them. And that for the longest time was really the only, film work that I was watching. But you put it together in a really, in a really compelling and engaging kind of way where, you can't hit pause. Like, you've just got to watch the whole thing all the way through. Like, you can't get up and walk away from it because it is that just boom, 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 engaging and compelling. So if you haven't seen it out there, I highly, highly recommend that you go check that out.
On that note, I read that somewhere, Alex, that you hired an editor.
Oh, yeah.
That was a narrative editor that was used to doing, sort of standard, narrative films, but you hired him to do the documentary format. What was the angle on that? Why did you choose to hire that kind of editor?
Well, it's interesting, because two reasons. One is I met Fanning and Parker in 2001 when Napster was falling apart, and as I already said, I was such a passionate fan of the technology and was really very aware of its kind of global cultural implications, and I was eager to tell their story. And I met them. And I kind of gained Fanning's trust, and I pitched and sold the idea of making this movie to a major Hollywood studio, and I was going to make it as a narrative, not a doc. Mm-hmm. This is like in 2003, and I was hired by that studio, and they paid me. I wrote it. I wrote many drafts, and it was in development with them for a couple of years. It took me a while to write, and I sort of met all the players and amassed all the research. And it was a very tough time to tell a story about the digital revolution because it was happening, Yeah. I mean, I wrote the movie before the iTunes store really took off. I wrote it before there was an iPod, and certainly, well before
smartphones or anything.
Fincher made the social network, and you had Facebook. So it was just too soon, and it was also probably the wrong guy because I wasn't telling a story where I was vilifying somebody for upending the status quo, which is kind of what they did with the social network. And I think it's easier. It's a great movie, and I love it, but it's easier to tell that kind of story within the establishment than a story that, sort of gives a balanced view of someone that most of the people in my industry view with utter contempt, and see him as someone that destroyed their business infrastructure.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I liked about it is that you do come forward in this and from a very balanced perspective. It seems like you come in and you kind of go to both ends of the spectrum and you say, I don't just want like the cheerleaders, for or against. Like, give me the people that have, something of substance and some depth,
that are passionate
about it, that can really kind of hit at the kind of the root of the philosophy behind what's happening on both sides of the spectrum, and that's what really makes it so compelling.
Well, thank you. I mean, and that's why I wanted a narrative editor. I had written it in a 3-act classical structure as a movie, and I wanted to tell the doc that way. So I purposely hired someone that was used to cutting, narrative 3-act structure, so we could build that kind of movie. The reality of it is that I've been around a while. You were talking about nostalgia earlier, so I grew up loving records and the music industry, and not thinking that it was not being Pollyanna-ish and thinking that they, often treated artists very well or anything like that, but I certainly had a lot got a lot of inspiration from great artists and from people like Donnie Ienner, who's in the movie, who ran Columbia Records for years, who I think is an inspiring person. And my point with that movie, which I think a lot of people got very thankfully, and the people that didn't, I found it interesting when they didn't, because people are just so incredibly biased against this sort of technological era that they get blinded by their hostility towards it and towards the idea of disruption to the status quo or to, having someone come and take away their vinyl collection. But I think that for me, when I met Fanning, I was taken by him because he was clearly a creative genius. And so the movie is balanced in my mind quite honestly, because it's not about disruption and like free music or, it's about creative geniuses over here in one camp and creative geniuses over here in another camp, and they're at odds with each other, but they're both very passionate and they both very much believe in what they're doing. But we live in an era where this one thing is going to essentially overtake the other, and that's just the organic flow of life. And it's interesting that a lot of people really butt up against that. And, some of the criticism that we caught, and I have no problem with criticism, you want it. It just means that people are being impacted by what you're doing. You know, by no means do you want everyone to just love what you do. If you do,
it means they're paying attention.
Yeah, exactly. Then
haters going to hate.
And that's mediocrity. You don't want mediocrity. You want something that's going to spark people. But I was sometimes amused by some responses that were like, oh, they just spend too much time talking about the Napster guys and they gloss over the legal ethics of whether they should have been downloaded. It's like, no, wrong. It's like, that's not what we're going to talk. That's not worth talking about. That's been given way too much lip service already. It's not what the story's about. It's about
I think that's been covered. Yeah.
Suddenly, Lawrence Welk looked cooler than Metallica.
I mean,
actually, you know what? It's interesting you mentioned that because that's when I got into Lawrence Welk a little bit and actually stopped listening to Metallica. Was that whole thing? There's some irony that you bring that up, but so I imagine we wanted to talk a little bit about it in the next 5 minutes or so. We have you got to know the Seans pretty well, Sean Fanning, Sean Parker. I mean, what's your time with them been like? What are these guys, like? Because I mean, like when I see the two of them, like these seem like people that I could just sit and listen to for hours.
Well, I've known them a very long time, so they've changed. I met them when they were very young men and really almost boys, late teens. They were both in their teens, and they are now men, and they've gone through an enormous trial by fire. When I met them, they were at an absolute low, and frankly, they were going to be in that low for some years after I met them. I mean, Parker was couch touring it for a while before, he created Plaxo, and then another company, and then he got into Facebook and helped scale and launch Facebook. And Fanning was, really devastated after Napster, and really kind of, went into sort of doing other physics and robotics and gaming type stuff because that's what geniuses do when they're stressed. It's not what I do. I go and watch old Disney movies and cry in a corner. He he works on quantum theory.
I just go to Scotch.
Yeah, exactly. So, these guys, I've known them a long time. I've watched them go through hell and back, and I care about both of them immensely, and they've both been horribly misrepresented by the media for the most part and misunderstood and continue to be, which is fine. And, we all do. And that's kind of just how that game works.
Maybe we can have them on the show to set the record straight sometime.
Well, I mean, I think the movie kind of sets the record straight. I think it's sort of, I try to show them, and I let them say things that can be condemning too. I mean, I let them in the movie, I let them try to excuse themselves or talk around things because they're human, and I just want to show all sides of who they are. But, they're very different. The Napster was kind of like a band. You had Fanning was kind of the composer, and Parker was sort of, lead guitar, lead singer. You had a bass player. You had a drummer that was constantly being replaced. I mean, it really was like a band. And, and Parker and Fanning are very much, these very tight-knit guys that are extremely different. But they are, and I say this without hyperbole because I've met a lot of people, and sort of to your point, they are two of the smartest people I've ever met by far, like far. And I've done stuff on astrophysicists, I've done stuff on quantum mathematicians, and these guys are just in a completely different stratosphere. And so I'm very grateful that I know them, and having interviews with them, you did walk away with your mind blown. I mean, I told Fanning at one point casually that I meditated, and like the next time I saw Fanning, he had like gotten into the sort of psycho brainwave analysis of meditation, and he had gone so much farther. I mean, that's just the way he thinks. He had absorbed it, digested it, transcended it. And so they're really interesting guys, and we definitely haven't heard the last of whatever they're going to do on this planet because they're constantly cooking up interesting things. And again, it's not to hero worship them. It's like I don't even agree with both of them in various areas or their politics or this or that or whatever, but they're very bright and they're very visionary.
Yeah, and they really seem it, and you do a really amazing job of kind of capturing and displaying that in your film, Downloaded. Of course, if people want to check that out, you can always visit the website. It's www.downloadedthemovie.com. Again, that's downloadedthemovie.com. You can go check that out. On the other side, we'll get into the new one, though, Deep Webs. And welcome back, boys and girls. It's the Crypto Show with our guest, Alex Winter. Alex, we were talking a little bit before the break about kind of your time getting to know the Shawns, of course, going back to 2001 up to today. Working with, of course, and putting together this documentary, Downloaded. Again, if you're just joining us, you can check that out. It's downloadedthemovie.com. But let's I want to segue a little bit into Deep Web. And you were telling us during the break, actually, something that was kind of an interesting thing. You were talking to Sean. Was it Fanning that had talked about
Fanning.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so tell us about that exchange.
Well, about 5 years ago, right as I was getting started to do it as a doc, I remember asking Sean, because the world was really beginning to upheave. The internet was really, we'd had WikiLeaks or it was like 4 years ago, whatever it was, and things were changing. I just said, what do you see as the next big disruption? Like, what is really going to change things in ways that are going to blow people's minds? And I was thinking of like driverless cars and nanotechnology and, and he said 3D printing. And he said 3D printing was going to take the sort of notion of the liberation of the masses that had started with the peer-to-peer and open source and crypto revolution. He said it would take it into the real world in a way that nobody could wrap their head around. And I just think it's really interesting. It links very much to kind of what made me want to make the Deep Web movie, though I hadn't thought of that quote when I did it. But, by then I was sort of aware of Cody Wilson. I was aware of years later, it was very clear what you could do with 3D printing. And, of course, it's the tip of the iceberg. That's kind of Cody's point. It's a symbolic gesture in many ways to say this kind of power is in your hands. Wake up, So that's just interesting, and that kind of harkens to sort of the next journey I went on, because Deep Web is really in many ways as different as it is from Downloaded, and it's very different. It is a kind of a continuation of the conversation that we started with that movie.
Well, and Cody, he popped into the bookstore the other day and told me that, and I mentioned, I said, we're going to have Alex on the show and, this kind of thing. And he spoke very highly of you, told, and cause I guess he's going to be, have a pretty predominant, part in this, Deep Web film that you're working on now. Is that right?
Yeah, he does. I mean, it's it's sort of the similar thing to Downloaded, where people get very confused. The Deep Web movie is essentially about, the revolution that's now taking place, or a movement, you could call it. I think quite safely you could call it a movement. Revolution, I think, is maybe a little over the top, especially in light of Russell Brand branding the word. But there is a movement, taking place. And I think that there's only so many players involved in it, and there's only ever been so many players involved in it. And that's really what I wanted to shine a light on. And it takes us, the movie takes us from, it's primarily about what's going on right now with the use of the Deep Web. The Deep Web the title's euphemistic, but it essentially refers to the non-indexable area of the internet, which is really just used mostly for administrative purposes. It's not anything mysterious or nefarious. But people have, using cryptography, they have, they've embedded themselves and created an environment within the Deep Web that's often referred to as the dark net. I don't like calling it that because I just think it tarnishes it with a dark brush when it's largely not.
It's not dark. Good. Yeah, it's not good marketing.
No, it's bad. Exactly. Yeah,
Creates
exactly.
an end to the need for permission slips.
Exactly. Yeah, and and you'll also be disappointed when you go there and don't find a lot of as much where is it? But
this is just
but the
milk
reality
for
is,
sale.
Exactly. There's it's the notion that people to me the internet has always been a tangible ecosystem. That's what was important to me about the BBS era. It was an ecosystem. I had friends there. They were all over the world. We were connected in real time. It didn't matter where we were. It didn't matter who we were. Sometimes we were pseudonymous. Sometimes we used encrypted email, depending on what we were talking about. And that's like 1988, 89, right? And then Napster comes along, and suddenly we're all doing it, on the ClearNet. And then the deep web sort of, through the evolution of the second crypto war, and you've got WikiLeaks and Chelsea Manning, and then Snowden, and all the Arab Spring, and then suddenly what you have is everybody feeling threatened and moving into the spaces between the zeros and ones. Really finding a tangible environment in the giant space between the code. And that's
sounds like a Rush song.
It really sounds ridiculous, but it's in pure math terms, that's what's happening.
And there are people behind that behind the code. And I think when you talk about technology or you talk about these subjects, it's important that you sort of also make these human connections, because it is such a human interaction when dealing with these technologies. It's what's opening the doors to so many communication possibilities, what these early bulletin board systems did. And then also, what Napster did was more than just music. It was a community of people sharing things. And then, with the deep web, there are actual people involved with it that have ideas about the world and have ideas about what world they want to create. So is it important to you when you make these films and talk about, technology and what the media sort of sees as this faceless sort of Borg kind of world, to actually draw out the human element and make these people and these relationships what matter in the film?
That's absolutely fundamentally what I care about as a storyteller, whether it's about technology or not. I am a humanist is the only ism I would say I subscribe to. And for me, the Napster story was so important to tell, specifically because there were two issues at hand that I felt needed to be rebutted. One was the notion, as you say, that everyone looks at technology as this kind of faceless environment. I think more damaging and worse than that is the narrative that this environment is bad, it's illegal, it's criminal, it's illicit. And to me, Sean Fanning is a pure-hearted human being with a very compassionate, holistic, humanistic vision. It had nothing to do with stealing stuff from people. It was the opposite of what one would call a pirate. And that was the story I wanted to tell. I wanted to tell the story of this human being who I found extremely compelling and empathetic. And again, not to try to make some one-sided argument in his defense, because that's not storytelling, but just to sort of say, what? Same with Donnie Einer on the record industry side. We'd always had these faceless people fighting this battle. Well, here's Donnie on one side who I care about. Here's Sean on the other side that I care about. And let's present these human beings, warts and all. And I just think that, with the deep web, there's a very specific group of people that have been caught up in this web, and for lack of a less cheeseball metaphor, and they're people. And they are really, really smart people, and they're very interesting people.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Speaking of the people, what did you think of the outpouring from the community to Ross Ulbricht and Lynn Ulbricht for the Silk Road?
Well, I can get into that in more detail. To answer your question, the movie focuses on a very specific cast of characters. It's very specific, and it looks at a couple of the people that were, very involved in the early, creation of what we now have as an internet and what we have as cryptography. It focuses on, some of the really, I would say, just like I did with Napster, I wasn't interested in every tech journalist. I was interested in the ones that actually were living this story. and Andy Greenberg, who wrote the book "This Machine Kills Secrets" about the crypto wars. And,
we carry that on the bookshelves here.
Yeah, well, we optioned that book for this movie, and Andy is one of the primary cast of characters in the movie. And the Ross Ulbricht story, to me, is the foundation, I feel, of emblematizing what's going on in the sort of the battle for control of our future, and what happens when you get caught up in snagged in the gears of this machine. The machine, by nature, some of this nature is malfeasance, is meaning purposeful harm, and some of it is just status quo, doesn't know any better. It's like you could say it about the RIA with the Napster thing. They were paid to enforce the law. The law said this was violating copyright. They were going to keep stomping down buildings until they destroyed Tokyo. That was just what they were paid to do.
See, it's interesting that you bring this up. This is something that I did want to kind of get to, is because on the show we've regularly kind of likened the Silk Road situation to that of the Napster revolution. And I really wanted to get to this with you, considering that you've done a documentary on Napster and that you're currently working on one about the Silk Road and Bitcoin. You might be one of the most well-qualified guys to talk on the parallels here. I mean, what's your take on this? Have we begun to see with the Silk Road, like what we saw with the Napster revolution? Is the DEA sort of the RIAA of yesterday?
Of course. I mean, the parallels are complete, and they are, not by coincidence, but by design. The reality of it is you had, people don't want to change, and law enforcers don't want to stop enforcing whatever law they've spent a lot of money and time enforcing. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of money involved in the system functioning the way that it currently functions. But the reality of it is, on a natural, organic level, is that life is flux. It's change. That's how things work.
Absolutely.
And so you cannot stand in the way of certain organic processes, and you can't take everybody that you see as being part of that change, label them with some horrible title, make them up if you have to, throw them in jail, and toss the key away. Of course you can do that, and they are doing that, but it's not only inhumane to those people who get caught up in those gears, whether it's Sean, Aaron Swartz, or Ross. Mm-hmm. It's also completely counterproductive because, of course, as soon as they shut the Silk Road down, and to be really clear, we don't even know we don't know what Ross's involvement was in any of that.
Absolutely.
None of that. It's completely, it's complete circumspect at this point. But what we do know about the Silk Road is that the Silk Road was shut down. It was a centralized system, much like Napster's system. And of course, it was only built that way by, the philosophy of DPR. And DPR's original Dread Pirate Roberts philosophy was very specifically about having a community that DPR, or however, there were many DPRs.
And we're about to head to break, Alex, so let's cover this on the other side. But we definitely want to talk about his philosophy as informing this new world. Welcome back, boys and girls, to hour number 2 of the Crypto Show. It's always our favorite hour here. I don't know why.
But you can check us out, logosradionetwork.com. It's thecryptoshow.com for all the archivey goodness, including this spectacular show with our guest, Alex Winter. Also, shout out to our friends over at libertymovementradio.com. This is, of course, the syndication debut over there. So if you're listening over there, a big howdy do to you. Alex, on the other side, before the break, we were talking a lot about kind of the Silk Road situation. And you were kind of mid-thought on that. If you want to just kind of pick it up and carry it.
Yeah, it was essentially, you had asked me, if there was a sort of Napster effect with this stuff. And the short answer is it's exactly the same. And what, even the technology is the same, to the degree that you had a philosophical visionary, or, a whole band of them in the case of Napster, who put that together, and they wanted it to be centralized. And in the case of the Silk Road, you had the Dread Pirate Roberts, or however many of them there were, using that moniker, who also had a philosophical viewpoint and wanted it to be centralized. And the centralization, the trust of creating a community with a central focus was at the very heart of the Silk Road. And, when it went down, just like when Napster went down, within weeks, if not days, you had a new Silk Road with more Dread Pirate Roberts. And a lot of the same people that were on the first Silk Road just moved over to that one. And then there was another. Then there was, Black Market Reloaded. And then there was, you had Atlantis at the same time as Silk Road. And then to go beyond that, just similar to what happened with Napster, you had LimeWire, Kazaa, Nutella, all these other copycats. And then, Brahm came along with BitTorrent and blew the world open, because he basically said, okay, the hell with these centralized or even quasi-centralized systems. Here is something that is completely untrackable and uncentralized, and that was BitTorrent, and the world would never be the same. And you now have
Open Bazaar, of course.
Exactly. You now have
the same.
The Cody Wilsons and the Amir Takais of the world, and the sort of the next generation of crypto people. I wouldn't even say crypto anarchists, because they're not all lumped in one political. They're just people who really believe in creating alternate systems wherever their political beliefs may be. They believe in they're in personal liberty, but that doesn't make them all libertarian. It doesn't make them all anarchist. They come up from all stripes. Cody would not, want to be called that, make his hair stand on end. So, they're not all people you can lump into one easy brand, right? What does unify them is a determination to have a kind of personal emancipation and liberty that they feel is their right, and to live sort of safely and freely within their own confines. And they have the mathematical acumen to create sort of crypto systems that will, or open source systems that will allow these things to function. So what you're going to see, and what we're seeing now, are markets. And again, I wouldn't even call them black markets, because I think that that's too derogatory and branding. But you have these free markets that are not centralized, and they cannot be stopped, and they're blizzarded all across the world, and they're open source. And if it's whack-a-mole, just like with Napster, if you hit one, another one's going to pop up. And the status quo has to understand, law enforcement has to understand, the drug war proponents have to understand that this is evolution, it's change, it's life, it's flux, and we have to move with these changes. It's organic. It's inorganic to try to thwart these changes.
It's emerging, isn't it? The nature is just is emergent, and this order is sort of being sort of naturally, sort of organically sort of grown. I totally agree with that.
In my own project, I work on a project called The Bazaar, which is a decentralized marketplace using open transactions. And I mean, even in my philosophy, it's not just limited to, drugs or, digital content along those lines, but things like stocks and bonds and checks, decentralizing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, completely. And that's one thing that Bitcoin is very, very good at, that people, out of fairness to them, it can be kind of boring to try to understand how it works. But, the blockchain is a very ironclad, verifiable system for all kinds of things,
Oh, it's amazing. We had Jeffrey Tucker on the show a while back, and he officiated the very first marriage that was instituted on the blockchain. And this is such a huge deal, because I've told people, you get on Facebook and everybody, oh, gay marriage, and you vote for so-and-so to legalize it. I'm like, look, man, the technology exists. Go out, get married. I don't care to who. I don't care, and I don't care to how many, and I don't care to what. Just go out there, put it on the blockchain, and and let the natural sort of organic process tend to itself. And so, from my end, it's kind of like that the whole gay marriage thing is solved. If you're against it and you don't think it should be a thing, and somebody says, hey, we're married, then you can go, I don't buy it. You're not coming over for Sunday dinner. Problem solved. And if you are, and you are sympathetic to this, then you treat it as such and allow the sort of market of man to do this, because this clearly going through government has not worked.
Well, the issues are that what government is also hard to quantify or stick under one umbrella. It also is fluid, and it also look at what happened yesterday. It's also at war with itself, right? It's not like you have a divided Senate now, and the reality of it is you don't see, there's no cohesion, and I think that can be because people have different theories. I don't necessarily personally come right out and say the government is all evil, because to me, having been around the block long enough, I like my union a lot, and I really don't want to be thrown at the at complete market forces, which is normally just corporate run and not out for my best interest at all. So it's the issue can largely be that there's very little cohesion, and there's little agreement that can be arrived at that can often benefit people, and I think that's where the frustration is. A lot of people didn't vote yesterday, and that's why we got socked with the Senate that we now have. But there is an enormous amount of benefit if you step back from the hyperbole and the media black and white frenzy around these new technologies. There is a lot of good that is going to come of building new ecosystems and new alternative means for procuring and contracting all kinds of things.
Don't blame me. I voted for Kodos.
I think that's what I'm going to start voting for from now on.
Well, I wrote in SpongeBob, so you can't get it.
Getting back to your film, Alex.
I think SpongeBob won, by the way.
he carried Texas.
You'll be happy to know.
Yeah, actually did. But just looking at the films and looking at your body of work, you made and how we started the interview, you made downloaded as sort of a retrospective, looking back at this pivotal period in time. But it's interesting that now we're you're making this new film during this sort of pivotal shift where we see it. Is that just because information has moved that quickly in our lives that's possible now, that you feel like the film will be relevant? Because you started saying that making the film early on with Downloaded, it wasn't quite ready. The audience wasn't prepared for what they were actually experiencing and seeing it sort of brought to them in a film. But is it now? Are people ready to sort of see
absolutely. I mean, you have to remember the difference is that when I'm talking about wanting to make this movie in the early 2000s, most people over 25 didn't know how to plug their phone jack into the side of their computer.
Right.
I mean, and I'm not being facetious. They really didn't. They would stick an AOL disk in and hope for the best. And it's not that world anymore. My mom who is in her mid 70s, who couldn't figure out her answering machine is wicked savvy on email and creating HTML browsers for her home business. I mean, it's comical.
Oh.
The reality of it is we are all, as a civilization, we have moved online. There's no going back. It doesn't mean it's the only place we're ever going to be, and cyber world will take over. I mean, it's not a William Gibson fantasy, though. There's certainly a lot of truth to a lot of what he's had to say. But we don't live completely in a cyber reality. But the reality of it is we are all online, and everybody understands the implications of being online. And in a post-Snowden world, everybody understands how these implications impact us as individuals. So, no, it's not the same. With Napster, I was really, I think, genuinely concerned, as was probably the studio, that the lion's share of the audience really just wouldn't understand what the hell we were talking about. And it's true. They probably would not.
No, exactly.
You know, today these things, you know, what the fate of Ross Ulbricht impacts everybody, and you know, the fate of you know, TPP and net neutrality impacts everybody, and you know, we are at a very, very critical time in our you know, in our evolution, you know, in terms of the shift from one very huge era, you know, the sort of tail end of the industrial age into the technological age. It's massive, and it's the very, very we're in the fetal position still. Yeah,
it's a cusp. You know? Is exactly where we're at. And you know, you mentioned in your Kickstarter video, I had seen that you had spoken to a fairly famous hacker and asked him, you know, because on the subject of the internet and kind of the technical age, what would happen if government pulled the plug on internet? And I mean, can you tell us who that was that you were talking to when you mentioned that, and kind of what his response was in maybe a minute? What would happen if the government did shut down the web?
Sure. Now, where did I say that?
It was in your Kickstarter video, I think.
Oh, there you go. Okay, great. 'Cause it's in the movie as well. You know, it's a lot of people have talked to me about that. A lot of the cryptographers, the crypto people that I've talked to, and the open source people I've talked to, and you know, this is a large part of the open source ethos is to sort of build a fluid, almost living internet, you know, that can function, you know, with or without the basic functions of you know, of how the internet functions. And you know, I don't want to get into the technical aspects of the net, but it, you know, essentially you can, like Egypt did, flip a switch and turn the net off.
Yep.
And if the government and Google wanted to, they could turn the internet off. Though there are, you know, infrastructures being built, and Bitcoin is helpful in this area. Open source is helpful in this area. That will eventually, you know, there's mesh technologies. You know, again, I'm touching on things that people can Google and investigate for themselves.
One of our guys actually here has worked on Project MeshNet a little bit.
Yeah, well, there you go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're getting into a new. I mean, we are really at the beginning, and the notion of whether we're fighting over whether we're going to open or close a free market.
Well, let's talk about it on the other side. Stay tuned. And so, Alex, we were talking about, you know, kind of where this is going, being on the cusp of these technological kind of sort of the industrial world and the technical world, or the technological world, and what would happen, you know, in the instance the government pulls the plug on the internet.
Well, you know, the government can't pull the plug on the internet at this point. I mean, they can screw it up pretty well, and so can the Comcast of the world. You know, because everybody's trying to figure out how to, you know, exert the most control of it on the one hand and suck the most profit out of it on the other. And those two motives are not internet friendly. So, and the internet will by nature rebel against those. So, but the thing is, they can't kill it. They're kind of, you know, no matter what they do, there will be workarounds, and they can't kill it because there's too much of the world's finance and information infrastructure is woven into the internet at this point. And so they would be dismantling global banking. They would be dismantling, you know, the way cities operate.
That's kind of what my take on it's been, is that this thing has kind of become...
it would be cutting off the face to spite the face.
They can't. It's just
it's become sort of the ivy that has woven itself into sort of the fabric of both the houses, you know?
Yeah,
and so maybe you want to tear down your neighbor's house, but if you do, you bring your own down in the process.
Yeah. Absolutely. And kind of what my movie is about, and sort of why I circle back to the early days of the internet a little bit, is that, you know, what we have to understand is that, you know, the internet was built by a combination of the military and anarchists, meaning people within the government and people who are very much outside the government. And sometimes they were one and the same people, because there's a lot of people,
strange,
you know, within, who were like at MIT or within the NSA or within DARPA or whatever in the early days that were both working under government, you know, funding and rabidly anti-government. And that's very well known in cryptography circles. So, you know, the reality of it is that the DNA of the internet is inherently rebels against control, and because we can't shut the internet down at this point, there's very little to be done to prevent cryptographers. Tim May, who is, you know, as I said earlier, one of the grandfathers or granddaddies of cryptography, who I interviewed for the movie, he has a lovely quote in the film, which I'm going to butcher now, unfortunately, because I can't remember it in verbatim, but he says something like, you know, sort of what I said earlier, that within the spaces of a very small line of code is infinite space, meaning, you know, within if they control the internet, that's what the deep web is it's just this unindexable mishmash of code that people are now infiltrating and creating infinite space within that is private, anonymous, you know, encrypted. You know, the markets exist there, journalists are working there, dissidents and foreign countries are communicating within this space. It's become this vast space that's threatening to people who want to exert control over the internet because they can't exert control over it, and it's threatening to the profiteers because they can't charge you for it. So, you know, really, if net neutrality gets broken, if TPP gets passed, I mean, if there are these sort of nefarious, draconian, you know, legislation passes that damages the internet and puts these shackles on it, more of the cryptographers will create the means, very fluid means, for the vast majority to crawl into those infinite spaces within the code. And that sounds like cheesy sci-fi, but that's exactly what we saw happen with Tor. And you know, Tor was for many years, that's the onion router, and it's the front end of the deep web. For those who don't know what that is, that's how you get to the free markets and everything else. And Tor
when you were talking, it reminded me of the Tor, because Tor was basically built by the military for people to safely sort of leak secrets and spy on.
It was both. I mean, the beauty of Tor is it was created both by the crypto guys and the Navy, and by the crypto guys within the Navy. And then when the Navy funding ran out, you know, the Electronic Frontier Foundation stepped in, who are the opposite of the government.
And you have that tension right now where people are trying within the government to sort of break Tor, whereas people inside the government are also trying at the same time to make Tor more sturdy and reliable.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
that tension is always sort of there, isn't it?
Yes. That's emblematic of actually the fight that's going on right now. And that's in my film, because I talk with Andrew from Tor at length in the movie. And, he talks about how there's on one hallway of a government building, you're going to have somebody in one room working to make Tor more secure, and two doors down, you've got another group funded by the same, committee that's trying to break it. Yeah. And, that's really kind of this crazy world that we're living in at the moment. And the reality of it is that we will always find ways to, now that the cat is out of the bag and people have entered this space and they've had that taste of freedom, it's not going to it may get battled back, but it's going to be a perpetual game of cat and mouse. And, the cat will get some mice. The mice aren't going away.
Yeah, it's and talking about this, and the movie that you're doing, the documentary Deep Web. I want to take a minute to talk about the Deep Web itself, because I think there's a broad misconception out there about just how big the internet really is. I mean, people they hop on their home computers, they see Facebook and Twitter, Craigslist, whatever, and the conception is okay, this is the internet. I'm on the internet.
Don't forget porn.
Yeah.
That actually comprises 99% of the internet.
But it's the reason we have the internet, really.
Yeah,
but it's only really a very tiny fraction of the internet, isn't it?
Yeah, though I don't want to, over dramatize it either, because the reality of it is that you're dealing with code and the math has sort of infinite capacity, right? Mm-hmm. But the clear net, the internet that we traverse, on a daily basis is an infinitesimal fraction of that capability. That doesn't mean, though, that there's, I think where it's been misconstrued is that there's this, like, sort of like dark matter in physics, that there's this, like, the lion's share of the internet is unseen by you, and, like, all this stuff is happening on it. It's really it's mostly code. I liken it to your car. You get in your car, you turn it on, you drive around. You don't really notice what's under the hood, right? The deep web is really what's under the hood. The deep web is all of that code that's unindexed, because mostly it's not worth indexing. Mm-hmm. It's like how a bank communicates with itself. It's all of that type of code. It's true. I mean, that's literally what a lot of it is, or how the government's moving, very bureaucratic, technical information to run sites. It's under the hood. But cryptographers then, what's beautiful about it, and what's often called the darknet, which is much smaller than, it's just a fraction of the deep web. The darknet refers normally to the sort of the cryptographic method of running shotgun basically on the deep web, infiltrating that space and using it to stay off of the clear net. And that's essentially, so I think a clear way of looking at it is you got the deep web, which is sort of under the hood, mostly administrative nonsense. The dark net is the purposeful space that's been created to hide from the clear net within the deep web. And that's where the free markets exist. That's where, the journalists and the dissidents and the whistleblowers and people who want to, have outreach groups for, sexual abuse and rape victims and people who don't want to be indexed. That's where they go. And they need a place to go. It's extremely important that exists.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm guessing that, looking at it now, I'm guessing that based on your work, in our dialogue here, that you take certain interest in a lot of the same things that we do here. I mean, Bitcoin, the Silk Road, technology's role in creating a better tomorrow, this whole thing. But one of the things that I kind of had a little question mark on is in the various celebrity circles, because a lot of these guys, do you find that you're sort of a black sheep in this regard, or is this something that you find like a lot of people like yourself taking an active interest in?
Well, I think that a deep interest in technology is not something I run into with a lot of people in terms of actually having. I think everyone's compelled by technology, and I certainly. The thing is, I direct mostly, and I work a lot in effects, so I've been dealing with technology in my work for many years, for like 25 years. But would I say that? I wouldn't say I'm a black sheep, because I honestly feel that, the things that I'm not a conspiracy theorist, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Though, frankly, most celebrities are, so maybe that would make me a black sheep. But, most celebrities are going to, talk foam at the mouth like Alex Jones, like for all day and night. But,
well, let's get into it a little more on the other side with our guest, Alex Winter. Stay tuned. So we were talking about the kind of the celebrity circles, Alex, and on your side of it, obviously you share a lot of the same interests: Bitcoin, the Silk Road, technology, kind of a freer, better tomorrow. Do you find, the question was, do you find yourself kind of the black sheep in this regard, or is there something when you kind of mingle and meet with these folks, do they kind of have a similar shared interest in this stuff?
Oh, sorry, did it to me again. In the post-Snowden world, I think everybody has been activated. And I think that you will always find people who to have a theory one way or the other about something that may be fairly heated. We're in a new era. I mean, people who didn't want to take Napster seriously because they thought it was just about, Metallica. I think people who didn't really take, WikiLeaks seriously, they thought that maybe it was just somebody, the people who dismissed Assange as being egotistical and, and anarchistic. In the post-Snowden world, I just don't think, it just came home to roost. I think that everyone now realized whether they think that Snowden is a hero or a traitor, I just think that the gloves are off and everyone realizes that what's going on in the technological era impacts them. What's going on with the current laws that we have that may or may not serve, the common man, it impacts them. Whether they're upper class, middle class, lower class, it impacts them. And so, these are really conversations you have all the time. I don't think everyone sits on the same side of the fence, but you have them all the time. And like I said, I'm not like a techno guru. I just, I'm fascinated by, and I'm also compelled by, where I think the ethics of technology are vital to where we are as a race and where we are going forward. So I think it's I'm more of a moralist and a humanist than I am a technologist, So I think this is a ripe area to investigate, but it's certainly not going to be the only kind of stories I tell, and yet I'll probably be always interested in the same themes wherever those stories are being told.
And those themes are really, aside from what we mentioned earlier about the humanist theme that you certainly draw from, but also the theme is really, to me, and what we talk about here on the show a lot, is the theme of decentralization, of sort of breaking barriers down and freeing and liberating this information. Do you sense that going forward, being that this is sort of a new dawn that we're looking out on, do you sense that this is something that's going to be naturally just sort of played out? Is there going to be a dark ages maybe where information is the fortresses are erected again to try to keep us from these things, or is it going to be natural?
Honestly, and this is kind of a heavy thing to say on a radio interview, but
sure.
When I did the Napster story, I was really emotionally invested in the journey that Fanning and Parker had taken. They were so young, they were so decimated, personally, financially, by the battle that they were fighting with this Goliath that just crushed them and vilified them. And then I embarked on this thing, and it makes what those guys went through look like child's play. When you're looking at Ross Ulbricht sitting in jail without bail for a year, God knows what he's got in front of him, hopefully exoneration, but who knows. And what happened to Aaron Swartz, and I mean it's really depressing, and it's serious, and it's grave, and the stakes are really high. And these are young, brilliant, passionate human beings that are really, being very horribly abused, and whose lives are being shattered. And it's painful, frankly. And, this is not a light movie, and it's, the stakes are not low. And so you can't be Pollyanna. I mean, it would be really irresponsible for me to go, it's all going to work out. Everything's going to be great. Like, we're going to have a better tomorrow through technology,
Open up with the Beatles and
Yeah, and it's like, it's things are pretty flippin' dark, frankly. And the pre-existing system is going down hard and not without a fight, and the fight can be bloody, and they don't play fair, and they've got a lot of power. And when I say they, I don't just mean like the big bad government with a capital G, because I think that's dangerous too, because it's not that cut and dried. I think that you're dealing with, at the end of the day, you're dealing with human nature. There are great people in government. There are great people in law enforcement. There are great people in all these areas that we can have problems with. There are bad people in technology. There are nefarious hackers who destroy people's lives. It happens every day. Look at the 4chan fappening, and that's the tip of the iceberg, right? So I don't think you want to be. I'm very much against black and white. Runs cat down. I just am very much about the gray, and but what I do know is that the people who are pushing back against these new systems are very punitive. They fight dirty, and there are a lot of people whose lives are being ruined, and that's pretty grim. Yeah. And do I think that's going to get worse before it gets better? Yes, I do, because I think that what's going to happen now is that the people who are fighting these systems so hard are going to wake up to the reality that they have accomplished absolutely nothing. That the systems that they wanted to shut down have not shut down. They've gotten stronger. The idea of stopping the free markets didn't happen. They got stronger. Bitcoin is stronger. Yep. The philosophies behind these technologies is growing every day. Public awareness and aversion to the sort of corporatocracy strangling the internet, the fight for net neutrality is growing every day. The whole new generation of people are coming up that grew up online. They're not going to want to see that stuff get ruined. So what's going to happen? I think we have a fight in front of us. I absolutely do.
Well, it's becoming very kind of plug and play. Some of the technologies, if you wanted to encrypt something previously, there was all these kind of steps and things you had to do, and you had to have some tech savvy about it. I just recently, for example, but now it's becoming very commonplace. I bought this OnePlus One phone recently. And, right in there, just right in the settings, you go in, it's got SMS encryption through something called Whisper Push. You can encrypt the phone, just like an option. It's just there. I just push the button and I go, okay, do that.
The calls are very well encrypted because every time I've tried to call you, no one answers. so apparently it's working super good.
I'm just trying to avoid your calls, Dan. That's what's going on.
So private that they're private from you.
It's so private you can't even hear it.
You should pick up. He wanted you to house it.
But he wanted me to house it. But I'm with you on the kind of that black and white and kind of being very, very anti. It's good guys versus bad guys, cowboys, Indians. This is very much a sort of I think an intellectual sloth kind of position for people to take and say, well, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, right? But, speaking of kind of intellectual capacities and guys that are kind of these forward-thinking, rather brilliant minds, I wanted to talk about the team a little bit that you're working with on this Deep Web movie. What can you tell us about these guys? Because, I saw you had Andy Greenberg as a consulting producer. We've had the pleasure of meeting him. We've got his book on our shelf. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the guys that are working, because you've got some award-winning guys in this crew.
Uh-oh. You there?
I think you might have. We're having minor technical difficulties. It seemed like what was happening with there was some setting in the Skype thing that was happening, and which seemed to like auto mute or something like that, or it could just be a giant conspiracy. Who knows?
They don't want the truth out.
I think that's what it is. Our guest this evening, of course, Alex Winter. We'll have him back up here in just a second, I'm sure.
Oh, and shout out to Lynn. She's listening.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Lynn. We love you. But also wanted to also give a little shout out to our friends over at Liberty Movement Radio. That's libertymovementradio.com. This is the syndication debut that's happening over there, and so we're very excited to get this broadcast and the rather compelling and engaging guests that we have out to as many people as possible. Is he back? Do we have him back?
No, he's trying. We're trying to get him back. But, it's important that people support Lynn and Ross's defense fund. You can go to freeross.org and still donate and help him out and help the cause.
And it is good news and bad news. The good news is you're listening to the Crypto Show. The bad news is it's the final segment. And so I hate to say that, but it's that last savory.
Depends on who you're talking to.
It's that last.
Might be flipped around on that.
Yeah, anybody that was anti-Napster, I think, is going, shut these guys up. But Alex, I want to talk a little bit about. Let's talk about the crew that you're working with, because you've got some brilliant minds here. You got Andy Greenberg as a consulting producer, writer over at Wired magazine and former staff writer for Forbes. He's a brilliant guy. But then you've also got, of course, Glenn Zipper, Seth Gordon, and Mark Schiller, and some of these guys award-winning fellows for some of their documentary work. Tell us a little bit about working with these guys.
Lucky enough to have a great crew on this thing come together for it, and it was very important on this doc to really have a high-level team.
Boy, somebody, it is a conspiracy. There's something trying to break things up. It's very glitchy. Alex, are you still there?
Breaking up on us there, Alex. I think you just dropped.
Oh,
but anyway,
something. You know what? I think it is. I think it's something about the crew. Because we've asked twice about the crew, and twice when we asked about the crew is when it started.
Jammed. You can't stop the signal, though, and I think that was the theme of the interview.
It was in nugget form.
You can try to stop the signal, but ultimately you won't be able to.
Ultimately, it's all going to get.
We must be doing something right.
Yeah, I guess if we're getting jammed, if our guest Alex Winter's getting jammed, I guess we're upsetting the right folks.
That's true.
So we must be doing something right here. Just wanted to go ahead and also take while we're waiting for Alex to jump back on here in this last segment, take just a brief moment to remind people to go check out our friends at Bitmain. That's bitmaintech.com. They've done us a great favor, helped us out with some Bitcoin miners. Great bunch of folks over there. Also, Commodity Discs. You can check out their Facebook page, Commodity Discs. That's a pure 9.999 round of silver, and you can get that. It's a brilliant piece because it's got a QR code on there. You can scan that, get the real time value of silver, and if you donate $100 to the show, you'll actually get a free one of these discs, and there's a very limited quantity of them, so check that out, Commodity Discs.
Also, everybody should check out this Sunday. We have a conference going on, or I'm helping sponsor a conference called Alt Expo. That's going to be at the Spider House Ballroom. I believe that's on Fruth Street, which is 29th and Guadalupe. Go ahead and check that out. There's altexpo.com, I believe, is the website. And there is going to be a whole host of speakers on different subjects, including technology, including some of the things we talk about, how to come together and create solutions outside of the political system or the parliamentary system.
I'll be giving a talk over how to use the deep web.
You will be giving a talk on how to use the deep web.
No kidding.
There we go.
Cool. Hey, there he is.
Oh, he's back.
Sorry.
No worries.
That's okay. I'm almost afraid to ask you about the crew again, Alex, because every time we do this, one of your guys must really be up to something.
Well, we've got Andy Greenberg, who wrote the book and has been, was the first person to interview Dread Pirate Roberts, and then has been instrumental in covering the rest of this story and other stories around the deep web with Amir and Cody and all of that, and then of course covering Ross case. So. We got all that. That's been very, very instrumental to us. And then Mark Schiller, one of my producers who actually was the person who came to me with this idea in the first place, worked with me on Downloaded. And Mark is amazing and was involved with Exit Through the Gift Shop and Senna and a lot of great movies, Particle Fever, a lot of great stuff. So I've been wanting to work with for years, who produced a movie called Undefeated, which won the Oscar a few years ago. And he's made a lot of Foo Fighters, a lot of great documentaries. So it's a really great team, and unlike Napster, I'm using an editor who has cut a lot of great docs because the story is happening in real time. I wanted the opposite approach that I took to Downloaded, where I wanted someone who really understood documentaries and could help me sort of carve the story, a really compelling narrative out of real-time news, which is the opposite of what I had with Downloaded. And so I got a guy named Dan Sweetlick who cut An Inconvenient Truth and Sicko and a lot of really fantastic movies. So it's a really great team.
Will it be at this coming South by Southwest Film Fest, or are you going to be premiering it there like you did with Downloaded?
Yeah,
okay.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm knee deep in the middle of it, so it depends on when I get it done. I'm not quite sure yet when we'll be done, if we'll be done in time for that. But we're cranking away and very, very happy with what we have so far. It's been very challenging, but it's been rewarding, and I really, every day I'm on it, I realize just what an important story it is to get out there. So,
are you waiting at all for Ross's trial, which has been postponed from starting, this week to now in January? Are you going to try to get footage from around the trial?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm not waiting for it, but I think I'll still be going when that happens, and it's certainly an important part of the story. And I've been working with Lynn Ulbricht, Ross's mom, and their defense attorney Joshua Draytell, and they're two really amazing people. Very, very smart. Lynn is, as you guys know, extremely versed in the intricacies of not just her son's case, but just the civil rights aspects of the internet and technology, and the implications on our constitutional rights. And so I'm going to be following that through what's going on in New York in January for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're going to, and maybe meet one of our guys. We're sending Mac up there to kind of keep us posted up to the minute. He's going to be at that because it is such a big case, and it is the implications of the outcome of it are so huge. Like, we try to stress that on this show for people, like, people that think that they live in this bubble and that it's not going to affect them. Like, no, do you enjoy things like eBay and Craigslist and, FedEx? This hits at the core of all of these things in ways that you can't begin to imagine.
And also the things that we don't see that could have been created.
Yeah, that's the thing I was going to say is, like, sure, in terms of just I think that what people need to understand post-Snowden is that, there's nothing conspiratorial about, discussing our rights. And, it's not, you don't have to be, anti-government to not want to have your rights impeded, because you don't know what government is going to exist tomorrow. Yeah. And, that's where I find people are more short-sighted in that way in terms of just the machinery of history. Like, we had the Third Reich was just in our rearview mirror, and that came out of left field. And we just, you don't know what, all this data is being collected, all these rules are being put in place. The implications of the Ross Ulbricht case is, if they, are in any way successful, whatever happens with Ross, if they're in any way successful of creating legislation that allows them to, to have whatever kind of search and seizure rules they want with your information, to have these extremely hyper punitive, laws around what you can and cannot do online and what happens to you if you infract those laws, that has huge consequences for people. And it's always historically been these sort of like seemingly dark, giant sort of trials.
Yeah. Oh, I think we may have lost them again, but I was saying
that then end up impacting everybody on such a fundamental level. So I just think that we really, you can follow. I just want to tell people this. I mean, Google's good, like go to the freeross.org website and like look at some of Lynn's blog, Google some of this stuff. It's like, there's just so much information out there that's very clear cut and easy to follow, and, educate yourself.
Do you have the T-shirt yet? Those are made here, you know.
Oh, are they? I just actually ordered one for my son from Cafe Press today, funnily enough.
There you go. Oh, very cool. The side note, you said Google is good. Just a fun fact for everybody out there. If you look off to your left, Google is actually now dropping their little mission statement of or slogan of "Don't be evil." Just a fun fact for everybody out there.
I was just going to say it's not only Craigslist or FedEx or these things that it could impact, but the businesses that we don't see that are the future businesses. The chilling effect that can come from this legislation is also something that's really impactful and to consider. The Napster of the future, the Sean Parkers of the future can be chilled by what's going on right now with Ross's case.
Completely. Of course, what it does to innovation is horrendous. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. I mean, it's an innovation killer. It's just, a lot of times when you're talking to sort of normal folk about that stuff, they will often their eyes will glaze over because they don't think they're going to create the next Facebook. I agree with you that's vitally important to protect.
Right.
So, Alex, in the last, less than, minute and a half, I guess, that we have, you are working on another one that's in pre-production right now, aren't you? It's something about, because you were, in Broadway productions of The King and I as well as Peter Pan.
Yes. I am a doc I'm going to do after this one is looking at kids in show business. And I was actually far down the road with that when I jumped onto this story because it just seemed like this needed to get told immediately.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm going to jump back onto that when this is done. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it. Alex Winter, our guest this evening. Want to just real quick before we get going, of course, you can check everything out. It's alexwinter.com, downloadedthemovie.com, and for the upcoming one, which are all very excited about, it's deepwebthemovie.com. Are we missing anything else? Twitter, right? It's Alex Winter minus the E. Is that right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, everybody out there in Radio Land, we want to thank you. Thank Alex Winter, our guest this evening, for joining us. Be sure to check those out. Also, want to thank our friends over at Liberty Movement Radio. That's libertymovementradio.com for our syndication debut and inviting us into their home over there. Until the next exciting adventure, kids, this is Ryan Dixon, Harlan Dietrich, our friends Danny and John saying good night and fare ye well.
FreeRoss.org. FreeRoss.org.
Be excellent to each other.